Where?
I buy them on Zinni.
Oh, I haven't done that
And
yet.
are you single vision or?
No.
Yeah, see, these are single vision, just for driving, so it's very easy, but if you have to do the progressive, it's slower.
I have. Now. So.
Yeah, and I just had my, I had my cataracts done, but I wanted to maintain my reading eyes, so. Anyways, I'm okay without my glasses. So this is just for the and for the community to be able to support. Mr. Rabbi, how are you?
Good. We are live with everybody already.
How's the wifey doing? You working a little brains out?
Yeah, as always.
I only get to see you guys for like brief little hi.
That's the same thing for us. Hey, everybody. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hey. Yes, Dina, our daughter turned 24 yesterday, which is important because, well, yeah, we brought her as a little baby to the Passover Seder here at Temple Beth and me in 2000. She's 27. But so yeah. So hello everybody. We hope everyone's Elul is off to a good start. We are we're in our final weeks of the year. We're in the final weeks of the book of Deuteronomy on our Wednesday night class. And we are soon to be, we're in our final weeks of Jeremiah, or a week of Jeremiah. So that's weird. I don't know. Hold us. Oh, you know what? I'm not sharing the right page yet. Let me share the page. I'm not sharing the page. Yeah, we should be finishing Jeremiah today. So there's still can't see the people. Yeah. We can't see you guys yet. Well, yeah, give me 1 second. I'm going to get everybody on our screen so we can see you on our screen. But yeah, we're going to finish up Jeremiah today, probably. And well, for some reason, I can't get everybody showing up that's there, but I'm going to, yeah, you guys can all see the screen there, but now we can't see the screen here. So hold it 1 second. All right, well, I'm trying to get it to show up here on everybody's screen and it's not working. Hey, everybody. Well, folks, for whatever reason, we can't see you, but you can see the screen and we now can see the screen. So that's gonna, yeah, but the people weren't showing up for some reason. I don't know. But we do want to get going because we're reading the last 5 chapters and some of them are long and some of them are really long. But we're in the last few chapters of Jeremiah. And let me just close off some of this stuff. Maybe that it would work. No, doesn't seem like it. All right. So last week we looked at Jeremiah was prophesying against the Philistines. He was prophesying against the Egyptians. We looked at the words he said about some of our other nations around us. And today he's going to continue that theme in his discussion about the Moabites. Again, let me just see if I can just pop this up for a very quick second. I'm going to show you all a map. This is a map because we're about to get into a little geography. So I'll just show you this map of the Moabites. So here's Judah. Here's where Jeremiah is living, in Jerusalem and Anatot here in Bethlehem, all these places in Judah. And then over across here is Moab and Ammon and Edom. That's what we're going to read about today. He talked about the Philistines last time. They were living here. And then, of course, Egypt. And the way that normally people go to Egypt is through Philistia on the coast, which is actually what the Torah says. We didn't go that way when we came out of Egypt. We went the back way, which would have taken a long time, even if it hadn't taken 40 years. It was the back way to go. But in this case, this direction that we're going, or that we're going to see today, we're going to be talking about these folks over here in Ammon, Moab, and Edom, and even a little bit of Aram up here in Syria. But yeah, these cities here, all here, we know where some of them are. That's probably not where Botzra is, but Botzra is down here. But anyways, we're going to read about these cities. Jeremiah is going to refer to them. A lot of these cities today are completely uninhabited, have not been excavated. People want to know what's going on. We don't really know. They haven't really been excavated. Here's Rabbah. It's not called Rabbah anymore. It's called Amman. That's the capital of Jordan. This is where like 90% of the people of Jordan live in this city. All of these areas down here, pretty much uninhabited. Botzra is not far away from Petra, which is obviously the tourist site that we went to a couple months ago, where a lot of people go. It's down here in Botzra, which is where Edom is. This city, Kir Hareshet, or Kir Cheres, is known as Karak, which during the Middle Ages was a site of a Crusader fort, which has been excavated, but not a lot of people live in the city or the town of Al-Karak today. So for people who've been to Jordan with us on our previous trips, we really haven't been to any of these places because they're almost completely gone. And if there's a village there, there's a little tiny village, and there's a town with, a similar name, like Karak and Kir, or Dibon, Dibhan, in Arabic. Other than that, really don't know it. Rabbah in Hebrew and Ammonite means great. And so the great city of Ammon is now Amman. So the name Ammon comes from the Ammonites, but as far as the city goes, there's not that much to see excavated yet, unfortunately. Maybe one day there will be. But so Jeremiah is about to go on a rant about the Moabites, and we don't. I just showed you the cities because otherwise we wouldn't know them, and if you want, go back. But again, these are cities that were occupied during the time of Jeremiah. Some of them were big, a few thousand people. But once they were destroyed during this period by the Babylonians, some of them were never rebuilt, ever. Even during the Greco-Roman period, they were abandoned. So these are from the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, and then that was it. The area also did become a lot less fertile, which is kind of explains why people didn't live there. And it was not man-made global climate change. It was just the natural change of the area where it got drier and drier and drier. And 10,000 years ago, it was a very green area, and it became not a green area. It's desert, and it's not very fertile, to put it mildly. It's desert. So that's one of the reasons why people stopped living there. And if the city got destroyed and then there wasn't that much there anymore, then people just didn't rebuild it. All right, so let's read about Moab. Again, Moab is the Moabites and Ammonites. Just to remind people too, according to the book of Genesis, they're descendants of Lot. They're related to Abraham through Lot, and they are children born to Lot through his daughters. So the Bible makes it very clear that these are not normal people based on their genealogy. They spoke language like Hebrew. They were very similar in some ways to us. The Bible essentially acknowledges that they are Semitic people. And not only Semitic people related to Abraham, but they do not worship God. They worship their own gods. And we're going to actually see that today, because Jeremiah is going to call out their gods as well. That's part of what he does. Calls out their cities, as representatives of them, and then their gods. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at Moab first. Rosemary, would you like to read for us?
Okay. Concerning Moab, thus said God of hosts, the God of Israel,
Uh-oh.
alas, that Nebo should be ravaged,
Wait a
Kiryataim
second.
captured and
Wait,
shamed.
Rosemary?
Yeah,
We do not hear you. Hold
you
it one
can't,
second.
well, I'm not on mute.
Rosemary, 1 second. You there?
All right,
We
test.
don't hear her. Hold it. We've got to figure this out. 1 sec.
I can hear you, Rosemary.
Oh, good.
1 second, Rosemary. How about now, Rosemary?
Test.
Nope.
No.
Nope. All righty. Hold it. Hey there, John. All right. Well, we have a little bit of a problem with other people's audio, so I'm going to do something right now. Rosemary, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Wait.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can.
Oh, great. Okay.
All right. Please go ahead.
All right. Concerning Moab, thus said God of hosts, the God of Israel, alas, that Nebo should be ravaged, Kiryataim captured and shamed, the stronghold shamed and dismayed. Moab's glory is no more. In Heshbon they have planned evil against her. Come, let us make an end of her as a nation. You too, Almad men, shall be silenced. The sword is following you.
Now, thank you, Rosemary, for actually reading that correctly. Yeah. Reverend Lynn, what does your translation say for that verse 2? Uh-huh.
They plan evil against her, and let us go. You also, old madman,
Uh-huh.
shall be brought to silence, the sword shall pursue you.
Yeah, that's pretty much the translation. So Reverend Lynn's translation is correct. The issue is, if you look at this, you think the word madmen is like they're mad men, right? No, that's the name of the town. The name of the town is Madmen. So just to show you, for those looking at the map of Moab, there it is right there, Madmen. So in Hebrew, the name of the town is Madmen, which is the name of this, the name of the town. So you can see it's right there. There's Kir, which I told you is the modern day Karak. Again, John, you weren't here when I was giving a little Moabite geography lesson, but we drove from when we drove from across from Jericho, which is where we crossed into Jordan, we drove south and we went past Madmen or Karak, those areas. We take a road down here and that goes along kind of like the Dead Sea, follows parallel to the Dead Sea and to the Jordan, that valley. And we would go past where Madmen is today. So yes, it's not the television show. It's not the that's yes, it is not descriptive of their characters. It is the name of the town. So in Hebrew, again, right here is Madmen. What's interesting though is there's actually what Jeremiah does here is very clever. He uses the word tidomi to be silent, which is a play on the word Madmen. So the word tidomi in Hebrew is a play on Madmen, and the word cheshbon, which that's the name of the town. Cheshbon, for those who can make out the Hebrew letters right over there, chashvu. Cheshbon, chashvu. The word chashvu in Hebrew means to plan or to think out. So the word in cheshbon they have planned is a play on the name cheshbon. Madmon, Tidomi is a play on that. So he's playing on the names. He took the names of the towns and he played on them. And what is he talking about? He's talking about the fact that the Moabites went with the Babylonians. And when the Babylonians were ravaging Israel and Jerusalem and Judah, they went alongside and took all the stuff. So the Moabites benefited from this war. And, you know, they were fighting with the Babylonians and they got the benefit. They got the spoil and booty. Jeremiah is going, they're going to get there. They're going to get it. Well, I haven't gotten to that yet, but he's basically now saying they're going to get it. Okay. So, but he's playing off their towns. Okay. Not all the time. But if there is one, there'll be a note. Those notes were both about the clever use of wordplay. All right, let's keep going.
Hark, an outcry from Horonaim, destruction and utter ruin. Moab is broken. Her young ones cry aloud. They climb to Luhit, weeping continually. On the descent to Horonaim, a distressing cry of anguish is heard. Flee, save your lives, and be like Aroer in the desert.
And if you look at the note there, not exactly sure what that means, but again, it's probably like a place where a city, one of the cities where it's like an oasis, you know? So be a little bit of a life in the desert. Here's what it says.
Surely, because of your trust in your wealth and in your treasures, you too shall be captured, and Chemosh shall go forth to exile together with his priests and attendants. The ravager shall come to every town. No town shall escape. The valley shall be devastated, and the tableland laid waste, because God has spoken.
Yeah. So let's talk about a couple things that he just talked about. First is Chemosh. You can figure out from the context who Chemosh is, right? It's their God. Chemosh is the God that they worship. So Chemosh is going to be captured too, with his priests and attendants. So that's their God. Their God is going into exile. Interesting. Okay. And then it says that they will be laid to waste. No town shall escape. The valley will be devastated and the tableland lay waste. So the Emek is the valley, and the Nishmad, the tableland, is this fertile plateau that existed for in the same way we call it a mesa today, right? In Spanish, the tableland or this area that they lived in, the Moabites lived in, which was a fairly flat, fertile area where they grew things. Now, eventually that tableland became, like I said, pretty much desert. But at the time, it was still fertile enough for there to be crops. This actually is from the very beginning of Genesis. We read about this because if you recall, Lot and Abraham's shepherds fight. And it's right towards the beginning. It's, it's chapter like 14. Lot and Lot's shepherds and Abraham's shepherds fight. And basically Lot and Abraham decide to part ways, go different ways. Abraham goes into the heartland of Canaan, and Lot settles in the tableland. He settles in these plains of Moab, which at the time were fertile. Of course, they become not fertile anymore because they become desert. But at the time,
The same thing with Jeremiah when he was going into jail and being pushed around, and I thought we read something about.
well, Jeremiah has been talking about the land of Israel being laid waste to,
Yeah.
his own home. Yes. Now he's talking about the other countries being laid waste to. So yes, he's using the same language for his neighbors now. So this is the Moabite.
How did Moabite become a desert?
Well, at least according to Genesis, there was also a terrific destruction that came about on Sodom and Gomorrah and the whole area, right? There was a destruction of fire and brimstone from the sky. As it turns out, there was, now we know for a fact, a terrific meteor that hit that area and destroyed, vaporized the area. We actually have discovered it. It happened in an earlier time to the time that Genesis describes, but Genesis is probably recounting the fact that the area was known to have suffered a tremendous cosmic event that vaporized entire towns. We have the evidence. We have the burn, the layer of burn now from that, and the heat that was generated literally caused stuff to crystallize. So we have that now. We've discovered that. There's also the issue that area, because of its tectonic situation, has been sinking and has been a site for terrific earthquakes over the years. About every 500 or 600 years, there's been a devastating earthquake that's hit Israel in that region, and it's being pulled apart. And so that area, which was once verdant area, I mean, literally like a lake, a huge inland lake that was there, is now been reduced to the Dead Sea, which itself is continuing to be it's disappearing at a very fast rate. So this area looks like it's God-forsaken area. So yes, we're pulling water out of it. That's part of it now. Part of it is that people are doing it. They know that we know what we're doing, but it's a little bit more complicated than that, because the water that's coming through from Jordan depends on that water. Israel used to depend on that water, and Israel doesn't take that water anymore. Israel's now taking all of its water from the Mediterranean. So it's not taking that water anymore, but Jordan still is. And it makes the Dead Sea evaporate even more. It's a more rapid destruction. And quite frankly, it benefits the people who are using it for phosphate and mineral mining because they essentially need to have that not underwater. So I don't know. I mean, I'll show you just very quickly that area because it's accelerated. But at one point, the Dead Sea, I'll show you what it looked like over time, even during our lifetimes, what's happened to the Dead Sea.
In the meantime, is verse 7 metaphor or was there an effigy of the god that was taken?
It could be literal. It could be that, that there's a statue of the god that they're talking about, but it seems as he's actually talking about it more metaphorically, the way people would have talked about our God going into exile. So what's interesting about it is it seems very similar type of language. Here's what the Dead Seas look like over some of our lifetimes. That's what it looked like in 31. And this is what it looked like about 10 years ago. And that's what it's going to look like. So you can see it's actually, you can drive across right here. It's not so the area down here, the southern basin, is pretty much what's used for the phosphate. See the evaporation ponds, those are basically just used now to cultivate the mineral stuff. So that's what the Dead Sea is going to look like in 30 years from now. So yeah.
In
Yeah.
regards to 7.
Yeah.
Which we were just discussing.
Yeah.
Glenn, mine italicized with, the word with.
Oh, okay.
Can we look at that one
Right?
more
So
Yeah,
time?
That really.
Yeah.
To me. I don't know if the authors of my Torah, but with, so it was something more than enough for.
All right, well, let's take a look. Well, let me show you one other thing. As we're looking at the Dead Sea, just before I close it off, as I said, this is what. Let me just finish this one.
Mary,
Uh,
yours is italicized with? See, Mary's, so mine Mary's up
with hers, yeah.
Mine Mary's up, Mary.
So wait, so this is, I just want to show you the Lake Lisan picture. Wait, why is it not? So this is where, yeah,
And what does Berger Lynn have?
which is considered like the premier English for our day. So I definitely recommend the New Revised Standard if you want to read it English. Well, for whatever reason, I can't get this picture to stop in the middle, but if you can see what Lake Lisan look like, that is what the Dead Sea looked like, in the last glacial period. So let me try one more time. It was a lake, and it was up till about 12,000 years ago. This whole area, that's the Dead Sea today, right? That's the Dead Sea, or that was the Dead Sea in 1930. That was Lake Lisan 12,000 years ago. So people still had, I mean, maybe 8,000 years ago, it was not quite as big as this, but you can understand that a body of water, there's no Jordan River. I mean, that's the Sea of Galilee, and that's the Dead Sea, and there's the Jordan connecting it. That was all. Well, it's not last. Well, it's not lasting. It's not lasting. It only lasts as long as this is flowing down here into this.
There's some water.
So as long as there's the Sea of Galilee is still filling up, which it is. Sea of Galilee, we were there this year, highest levels that they've had in 25 years. No, a lot's down here at the Red Sea. But see, here's where Tiberias is, and that's the Galilee. So that's what it looked like. Anyways, I'm showing you that because, again, when you take into consideration what is yes, yeah. But some of it's man-made and some of it is just the natural time as we've gotten further away from a glacial age, from the Ice Age. All right, so let's go back to Kamosh. Yes,
Before you go on, you mentioned something about one edition. Something
What?
Lynn's edition.
Reverend, the Revised Standard Version.
Why? Why is it different than Mary? I think mine marries up.
Because the King James was considered for years the English translation, right? It was the preeminent English translation, but it was King James English. It was English from Shakespeare, right? And so people thought the English was a little outdated, and people didn't use those words anymore. So the English needed to be updated. So people came up with newer translations. What happened is the King James was also done with the intention of being poetic and trying to keep the rhyme and rhythm of the Hebrew, of the original Hebrew. The Revised Standard Version really doesn't concern itself with that. The Revised Standard Version is trying to get to the simplest English literal translation of the Bible without that. So if you want to know, like, what does the word probably mean? It's the RSV or the new RSV, which is even a newer version. Those are the
Actually,
best
it's the
translation.
RSV.
Yeah. The new RSV isn't that bad, isn't that different, but if you have one of them, but it was not done with the intention of keeping the poetics of the Bible, but it was a literal translation and trying to get to the real words that we know. That's why I like the RSV, but it's not going to keep the poetics of what he just did, for example, which is play on the names of the town. Now, again, King James, it can't really do that either, but it did occasionally keep it. There has been an attempt to keep that in some of the English translations, the poetics, the Hebrew style. There's a translation called the Fox translation. That is a translation that has attention of keeping modern English, but also the rhythm of the Bible.
Don't worry, they'll change that too.
Well, look, as our language changes, obviously the translations need to change a little bit too. But again, I think the new RSV is fine. And again, the JPS translation, there's the JPS translation, and then there's the new JPS translation, which I think came out, one of them came out in 86. English hasn't changed that much since 86. All right.
It's interesting though.
Yeah.
The language does change.
Yeah.
And there was an article in the paper this morning about the Pope and Jesuits, about the sort of monolithic standard of the Roman Church. And then the Pope says, come on, guys, language changes. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I saw that. That had to.
Interpretation of the language.
the language changes and its understanding. of the language.
But remember, part of that is also who controls, yeah, and whether the way that you've now translated includes things that I don't want it to include. So that's part of the issue. Is that the way we translate it? So yeah, definitely thinking about that. We're gonna think about it, especially when we get into our next book of Ezekiel, when we get into that. Anyways, we'll see. So and Kamosh, this is the one where we had this question. Kamosh Begolah, which is
Why is it-
What's the different word with be?
Why is John so italicized?
so and Kamosh, what does it say? Kamosh. One thing.
Kamosh shall go forth into captivity with his priests and his princes together. So I would think, right, that they've emphasized that, meaning it's not a metaphor. But I guess it could be, I suppose, right?
Well-
They're emphasizing it. He's going away.
Yeah.
with his-
Yeah,
with
his God is going away. And again, just to point out, the Hebrew says kehonav, which are their kohanim, that the word kohen is a priest, not just a Jewish priest, but any kind of priest. And so yeah, I'm not sure if they were I'm looking to see if there's any other plays on the English, if there's any other Hebrew words that were not translated into English or plays off of them, but there aren't in here. But they are saying that, yeah, but they are saying that because they were so materialistic with their wealth and treasures, that's also going to be taken away. That's clearly what they're also saying. Yeah.
You know what else though? I've realized that, like, I guess in a perfect world, if we were doing Torah study, we wouldn't be discussing the translation. Right? We'd be reading it from the Hebrew. We'd all be fluent in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And then therefore trying to dissect what each Hebrew word meant.
Yeah, it would definitely be easier if we understood Hebrew. But I will tell you that even if you understand Hebrew, there's things in here that you need to have explained, because some of the Hebrew words just don't mean the same thing anymore. The Hebrew word has changed, and unless somebody was there to tell you, I mean, not the ones we just showed, but there are examples of Hebrew words that have changed. And so unless somebody tells you that's not what Jeremiah meant by that, this is what he meant by that, you wouldn't get it. But it's just there is, when the play is there, I'll definitely show it to you. Let me just see if, nope, not there. All right, so I didn't think so, but let's keep going with his diatribe against Moab.
Give wings to Moab, for she must go hence. Her towns shall become desolate with no one living in them. Cursed be he who is slack in doing God's work. Cursed be he who withholds his sword from blood. Moab has been secure from his youth on. He has settled on his lees and has not been poured from vessel to vessel. He has never gone into exile. Therefore, his fine flavor has remained and his bouquet is unspoiled.
Yeah. Now, when Jeremiah is saying he's never gone into exile, look, the Jews have gone into exile. Judah has been exiled at this point in stages. Some of the people have already been taken away in exile. You're going to see it at the very end. Jeremiah actually tells us the waves of exile. But on top of that, Israel has already been exiled. The northern tribes were exiled 150 years before. So we as Israelites, we as families of Moses and the tribes, we've already felt it. And he's basically making fun of the Moabites by saying, these guys have had it easy for the last 150 years. They haven't dealt with the kinds of stuff that we have as Jews. They've been sitting there over in their Napa Valley and enjoyed their fine wines while we've been dealing with our stuff. So that's exactly what he said. He compared it to beautiful wine that, if we were going to use the modern comparison, that's what we would use. But here's what's going to happen.
But days are coming, declares God, when I will send to him those who will decant him. They shall empty his vessels and smash his jars. And Moab shall be shamed because of Chemosh, as the house of Israel were shamed because of Bethel, on whom they relied.
Yeah. And so here it says, yeah, and when our northern kingdom was taken away, it's because they were worshiping in Bethel, which is, of course, a knock on the fact they weren't worshiping in Jerusalem. They were worshiping at Bethel at those golden calves. One was in Bethel and one that was in Dan. And you know how they're going to get taken away for their God? That's what happened to us. That's what happened to Israel, worshiping a God. So you're worshiping Chemosh, same thing as Israelites worshiping Bethel. Now, again, the people of Bethel were worshiping Adonai. They were worshiping God, but they weren't worshiping God in the right way. And as far as Jeremiah is concerned, it's the same deal. You're going into exile with these false gods. King James? Does it say decant?
Mine just says killed.
Yeah. Yeah, decant is, yes, it has something to do with wine, which is why decant can be used. What does yours say, Mary? verse 12, yeah. Yeah, but here they use wander, which is or press forward against him. I mean, here they're clearly using the word to open up or to press as if to say that that's probably what Jeremiah meant, which was to play off of the wine metaphor, which is, it makes sense. I believe that that's what he's doing. Because he's talking about opening up these jars, and the same thing you do today, they did in the ancient world. If you're going to decant the wine, that's going to change the flavor of it. And that's what he's saying. So God is going to turn the Moabites into worthless wine and break it. So
On 13,
Mhm.
before, very, very quickly. So it looks like it's a derogatory statement against Bethel.
yeah.
So why are there synagogues called Temple Bethel?
So Bethel literally means, and again, the word here is put into one word, but Bethel means the house of God. That's what Bethel means. So you can't turn the word into something bad. The place was not, they weren't worshiping God the right way at Bethel, and they should have known better. So Bethel is still legitimate for a synagogue. It's still legitimate for a church. So they usually will call it Bethel, but it's Bethel, Bethel. Yeah. All right.
How can you say we are warriors, valiant men for war? Moab is ravaged. His towns have been entered. His choice young men have gone down to slaughter, declares the king, whose name is God of hosts. The doom of Moab is coming close. His downfall is approaching swiftly. Condole with him, all who live near him, all you who know him by name. Say, alas, the strong rod is broken, the lordly staff. Descend from glory and sit in thirst, O inhabitant of Fair Dibon, for the ravager of Moab has entered your town. He has destroyed your fortresses.
Yeah, let me see if that's not really a play on it. Yeah, no, this is pretty awful. This is pretty awful, as Reverend said. Yep.
Stand by the road and look out, O inhabitant of Aroer. Ask of him who is fleeing and of her who is escaping. Say, what has happened? Moab is shamed and dismayed. Howl and cry aloud. Tell at the Arnon that Moab is ravaged.
And that's again the river. Arnon River is one of the main rivers that bisects. Just show you real quick. This is the river that bisects, goes through Moab. So this is telling people, and then Aurora is there right here. Aurora is by the Arnon. So it's a play off of the same word, which has as its root again, something to these were the crossroads of Moab, and this country that had escaped all the turmoil that Israel and Judah had been going through for the last 150 years. It's coming to you now. It's headed your way. And you're going to get it.
Judgment has come upon the tableland, upon Halon, Yazah, and Mepha'at, upon Dibon Nebo and Beth Diblatayim, upon Kiryataim, Beth Gamul, and Bet Meon, upon Kiriot and Bozrah, upon all the towns of the land of Moab, Thar and Deir. The might of Moab has been cut down. His strength is broken, declares God.
Yeah. So again, all these towns, some of them we know where they are, some of them we don't know where they are. But this is all in modern day Jordan. And these were towns that the Moabites lived in and were living comfortably. And Jeremiah is telling them they're coming for you.
Get him drunk, for he vaunted himself against God. Moab shall vomit till he is drained, and he too shall be a laughingstock. Wasn't Israel a laughingstock to you? Was he ever caught among thieves that you should shake your head whenever you speak of him? Desert the cities and dwell in the crags, O inhabitants of Moab. Be like a dove that nests in the sides of a pit. We have heard of Moab's pride. Most haughty is he, of his arrogance and pride, his haughtiness and self-exaltation. I know his insolence, declares God, the wickedness that is in him, the wickedness he has committed. Therefore, I will howl for Moab. I will cry out for all Moab. I will moan for the people of Kirhares. With greater weeping than for Yazir, I weep for you, O vine of Sibmah, whose tendrils crossed the sea, reached to the sea, to Yazer. A ravager has come down upon your fig and grape harvests. Rejoicing and gladness are gone from the farmland, from the country of Moab. I have put an end to wine in the presses. No one treads the grapes with shouting. The shout is a shout no more. There is an outcry from Heshbon to Eliala. They raise their voices as far as Yahaz, from Zoar to Haronaim, and Eglat Shalishia. The waters of Nimrim shall also become desolation.
Yeah, and I imagine, in some church somewhere, people are reading these verses and people are going, oh my gosh, where are the waters of Nimrim? I think they actually did that on The Simpsons years ago. Reverend Lovejoy is reading, some passage like this with places, with these names, places. And again, you're never going to have any of these places because they're all in Moab, but nobody wanted to name some town in the middle of Kansas after these places. So no one ever reads these places. They never find their way into, there's no place in Utah named after this, but because they're our enemies and there are people who made fun of us. And the Bible has just told us that they're getting their comeuppance, that these places are going to get destroyed. And Jeremiah is saying, look, you guys have been sitting there laughing at us for the last 100 years. It's over. And again, you're like, where's this anger and animosity coming from? It's coming from people from looking over the Jordan Valley and looking over at these people and going, you guys have been making fun of us. And not only have you been making fun of us, you've been participating in the destruction. You've been part of the looting and destruction that's going on. You're making money off of our destruction. So Jeremiah is mad. And remember, Jeremiah has been mad at us for the last 48 chapters. So the fact that he's got a little bit of animosity towards our neighbors, remember, the vast majority of this has nothing to do with them. It's about us. But he's mad at it. He's mad at these people for sitting there and basically sitting there and enjoying their lives while it's been going to hell. Now, just to use a modern equivalent, it didn't happen. It's not hopefully ever going to happen. But let's just say that our country really did go to hell. And the people in Canada are sitting on the north making fun of us and making money off of us and watching our destruction and our turmoil. And after 100 years or so, that might start wearing on us a little bit. And some of us might become Canadian, which is probably what happened. And Jeremiah knows that some Israelites have gone over to the other side and have settled there. They've been doing it for a long time. They've been doing it for 500 years. How do we know? Because King David's own family did that, right? That's how Ruth was part of our family, because Naomi and her sons and husband, right? They had gone over to, they had left Judah during one of the famines and had lived in Moab. And then Ruth ends up coming back with them. But Moab was a place where where Israelites would run to during bad times, which some people have done to Canada. But anyways, the point is that by this point, the neighbor had become a little bit much, and we were sick and tired of it. The Judahites were saying, enough already. These people have been sitting there making fun of us. capitalizing on our destruction, and it's going to come to an end.
And I will make an end in Moab, declares God, of those who offer at a shrine and burn incense to their God. Therefore, my heart moans for Moab like a flute. Like a flute, my heart moans for the people of Kirheret. Therefore, the gains they have made shall vanish. For every head is bald, every beard is shorn. On all hands there are gashes, and on the loins sackcloth. On all the roofs of Moab, and in its squares there is naught but lamentation. For I have broken Moab like a vessel no one wants, declares God. How he is dismayed. Wail. How Moab has turned his back in shame. Moab shall be a laughingstock and a shock to all those near him. For thus said God, see, he soars like an eagle and spreads out his wings against Moab. Kiriot shall be captured, and the strongholds shall be seized. In that day, the heart of Moab's warriors shall be like the heart of a woman in travail. And Moab shall be destroyed as a people, for he vaunted himself against God. Terror and pit and trap upon you who dwell in Moab, declares God. He who flees from the terror shall fall into the pit, and he who climbs out of the pit shall be caught in the trap. For I will bring upon Moab the year of their doom, declares God.
You there? Oh, Rosemary? Hello.
Seems like having a good stopping point too.
Yeah, well, it's part of the prophecies, but yeah, we lost Rosemary. Rosemary.
In the shelter of Heshbon, fugitive Heshbon, flame from the midst of the people of Shalom. Woe to you, O Moab! For your sons are carried off into captivity, your daughters into exile. But I will restore the fortunes of Moab in the days to come, declares God. Thus far is the judgment on Moab.
That's the very end of the Moabite stuff, but again, you know, they're called the people of Chemosh. That was, it says, the Am Chemosh, the people who worship Chemosh. We're going to see this with the Ammonites coming up. So this is the Moabites. It's a fairly long prophecy. You can see it's 47 verses. The Ammonites, not quite as long. And again, the Ammonites are called Bnei Ammon. They're the sons of Ammon. It's a little bit different title than Moab. Moab is just Moab. Bnei Ammon means the sons of Ammon. Now, it's not a major difference. I don't want to harp on it too much, but it shows you that, like, we were called Bnei Israel. We were called the children of Israel, but sometimes we're referred to as Israel. Ammon seems to be normally referred to as Bnei Ammon, and maybe rarely. And again, I think there was just a few times that I looked out of the Bible where Ammon is referred to by itself just as Ammon without Bnei before it, but it seems like normally it was. Why do I know this? Because believe it or not, this is like actually the one thing that I found very interesting in my biblical studies, which was how the other nations are treated in the Bible. So if I had ever written a book or done a thesis, it was going to be on specifically how biblical authors treated their neighbors, because I think it's another place where you can look at it. And again, absolutely no one would have cared, but it is one of the ways for people to kind of identify biblical authorship. I think one of the ways is by the way they talk about these other countries. People who are really had it for one country in particular kind of give it away. They can't help themselves in smashing that country at every opportunity they have, they'll smash it. If they don't treat the country so bad, maybe that also says something about their agenda. So some of what we can see in the Bible is a political agenda about the neighbors. And Jeremiah happens to be one of those places where we get them all, well, not all, but we get the majority. And we get the Phoenicians, we get the Philistines, we get the Egyptians, we get the Moabites. And so you get to see the world from the standpoint of a guy like Jeremiah who lives 2,600 years ago, and he lives in Judah, and he's sitting in Judah, and he's looking around his neighbor, and he's saying, this is what's happening. This is what I see. So again, does an American who lives in, 2023 looks around the country or looks around, his neighbors, or specifically now looks around the world and makes these judgments about these countries? I find it interesting because I find that interesting because I'm interested in foreign policy. I think it's interesting what people did 2,500 years ago along the same lines. But if you or I are going to talk about the countries around us, probably not going to actually even talk that much about necessarily just Canada and Mexico and whatever the nearest, El Salvador. Probably going to talk about Russia. We're probably going to talk about China. We're going to talk about Afghanistan. We're going to talk about Iraq. We're going to talk about countries that are in our minds, that we have feelings about. Israel, whatever it is, people have that. They have those feelings, and it comes out in their writing, and they can't help themselves. So Jeremiah is doing this right now. And again, whether he did this all at one time or most likely Baruch and his scribes put this stuff together and assembled it later, 100%, it was placed here together at the end of the book of Jeremiah. It's obvious. It's here at the end of the Jeremiah in one collection. And these are the prophecies against the nation. So here's the one against Ammon. It's not as long as Moab's, but you'll see some interesting similarities between them. And again, just to show you the quick map, it is literally interesting, by the way. Here you see Ammon. In this map, it looks like Ammon includes this area down here, which at least in Jeremiah, Diblatayim and Nebo and Beth Maon are all included in Moab, whereas it looks like here that it's part of Ammon. The reason is they probably fought amongst themselves for who controlled these areas that were on their border. Just like Israel and Judah would fight, they probably, Ammonites and Moabites would fight over these towns, who controlled them. And again, at least in the biblical period, during part of the biblical period, as we know, this is where the Gadites, the Reubenites, and Manasseh also lived. This was the area that we had taken during the time of Moses and the people coming into the land. Part of this area was supposed to at least been inhabited by us. So there were times when Jews lived on this side of the Jordan River. And as our tour guide pointed out in June, Guy had said, and again, matter of factly, he wasn't saying it to be political, never in the history of the Middle East has this river, the Jordan River, ever been a political boundary. Ever. It's never been a political boundary. People have always lived on both sides of this. During the Greco-Roman period, the Romans had no distinction between those two areas.
That is odd. Rivers are so often boundaries.
Not that river. The Jordan River, partly because it's not that big of a river. It's not that hard to cross. So because it's not hard to cross, it doesn't serve as a natural boundary. But also because the peoples who lived in these areas always were free flowing back and forth. And again, partly because it wasn't a natural boundary, that flocks and herds would go back and forth across this, and it just didn't. This valley was more cohesive as a valley than it was as a boundary, and it is today, obviously. But it didn't always. Not only did it not always exist, it never really existed. So sometimes the Ammonites were on this side, sometimes we were on that side. The Judites were over here, and vice versa. So these are not great natural boundaries, these areas. And again, do they serve as good boundaries between the Ammonites and Moabites? Most likely not. Most likely those guys were fighting for control over that stuff. So here's what it says about Ammon.
Concerning the Ammonites, thus said God, has Israel no sons? Has he no heir? Then why has Milcom dispossessed God? And why have his people settled in God's towns?
And there is Jeremiah saying flat out, Ammon is living in places that we are supposed to be living in. These were areas that were taken over by the tribe of Gad, and the Gadites are supposed to be living there, not Ammon. And Milcom, as you can see, is the name of the Ammonite deity. So Malcolm or Milcom was like Chemosh, was the god of that area. So the Ammonites had Milcom, the Moabites had Chemosh, and we had Adonai. And that was our God. And our God says, Adonai says, why are these people living in our towns? They're not supposed to be there.
Assuredly, days are coming, declares God, when I will sound the alarm of war against Rabbah of the Ammonites. It shall become a desolate mound, and its villages shall be set on fire, and Israel shall dispossess those who dispossessed him, said God.
Yeah, and so Rabbah is Ammon. As I told you, Rabbah means the great city, the great place. That is the Rabbah of the Ammonites. That is their great city. That's still called Ammon today. It's going to be nothing. And they'll be punished for living where we're supposed to be living. And here, of course, is going to be the calling out the towns, the cities, the villages of Ammon, which include
Howl, O Heshbon, for Ai is ravaged. Cry out, O daughters of Rabbah. Gird on sackcloth, lament, and run to and fro in the sheepfolds. For Milcom shall go into exile together with his priests and attendants.
same phrase. Their God's going into exile.
Why do you glory in strength? Your strength is drained, O rebellious daughter, you who relied on your treasures, who said, who dares attack me? I am bringing terror upon you, declares my sovereign God of hosts. From all those around you, every one of you shall be driven in every direction, and none shall gather in the fugitives. But afterward, I will restore the fortunes of the Ammonites, declares God.
And that's it.
Was
6
this all at
verses.
the same time?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So 6 verses. That's all he gets.
wow.
Pretty much the same thing. It's pretty much a summary of the past 40 verses that he got for the Moabites. Again, maybe Ammon was at that point, doesn't seem like it was as big. Wasn't as big, but same thing. He says ditto for you guys. And here's Edom, which is further south.
Concerning Edom, thus said God of hosts, is there no more wisdom in Teman? Has counsel vanished from the prudent? Has their wisdom gone stale? Flee, turn away, sit down low, O inhabitants of Dedan, for I am bringing Esau's doom upon him. The time when I deal with him. If vintagers were to come upon you, would they leave no gleanings? Even thieves in the night would destroy only for their needs. But it is I who have buried Esau, have exposed his place of concealment. He cannot hide. His offspring is ravaged. His kin and his neighbors, he is no more.
Yeah. So basically, again, Esau is going to be destroyed too. Bless you. Okay. Well,
Leave your orphans with me, I will rear them. Let your widows rely on me, for thus said God, if they who rightly should not drink of the cup must drink it, are you the one to go unpunished? You shall not go unpunished. You will have to drink. For by myself I swear, declares God, Bozrah shall become a desolation, a mockery, a ruin, and a curse, and all its towns shall be ruins for all time.
yeah. So Botzra is a town called Busera now. You can't even find it on a map of Jordan today. But here's Botzra down here, a little bit closer to Petra. Yeah, and specifically, that's what he's saying, is that these people will not. Oh, hey, Michael.
Can I restart the computer?
Well, do it real quick. Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
because we're having a problem. We're trying to get Rosemary, at least for the last half, we'll be able to hear her up on the screen, and you'll be able to hear better. And we'll be able to see it. So guys, if you lose us, it's just for 1 second. Michael's here trying to restore. He came over to try to help. But yes, again, Botzra is a little bit closer to Petra, but we're not even sure. I mean, Busera, the town today in Jordan, is not a very large town, and there's not a lot there.
I saw it was in 2 places.
Yeah, so there's a question of whether it's there. that reason, by the way, has nothing to do with our Bible. It has to do with the Christian Bible. Botzra is mentioned in the Christian Bible as a site of battles, of final battles, of an apocalyptic battle in Botzra. And it does not seem like it could possibly be down here. So why is it up here? Because it seems
Where did they get that from?
from the Bible, from the Hebrew Bible, but they don't seem to. Here's what I will tell you. The logic of why they knew it was on the other side of the Jordan River, the people who wrote it in the Christian Bible, but because they didn't seem to really know where it was, or maybe again, by that time, Botzra was pretty much abandoned, they're able to kind of make that mistake and say that it's up here when it's really not. It's really down here in Edom. But where they describe it in the Christian Bible, it seems to be up here. And that's why that's even there. It's only there because of its place in the Christian Bible. So just know that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter that it doesn't matter for Isaiah or Jeremiah or any of the prophets in the Hebrew Bible that it's there. It's because of the Christian Bible that Botzra is there. So just so you know. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Thank you.
Now your voice is gone.
Yeah, now I have to be my guy.
Now you've got an echo.
Not anymore. There it is. So I had to take us off of the sound. We had you playing through the computer, Rosemary. So now we have you in the synagogue,
Ah,
right? You got
Okay.
Rosemary? Rosemary?
I can hear you. Can you
Yeah,
hear
we
me?
got you. We got you here.
Okay.
So yes, thank you, Rosemary. So yeah, I'll just since it came up, let me just pop it up right here. Yeah, no, it works. So let me just show you Botzra. So Botzra in Edom, again, it comes from the word sheepfold or enclosure so this is what it looks like today. So for those who drove through Jordan, this looks like everywhere in Jordan. This old town right here, right, John? That looks like Jordan. So that was the capital. That was the capital of Edom. So it's called Busera. This is, but here it says right here, according to one Christian interpretation of Micah, Botzra is a place where, it has to do with the, it has to do with some translations of where Botzra was, which again has to do with the Septuagint. It's not even so much even the Christian Bible. It's more Christian interpretations of where Botzra is. So yeah, let me just see if this is. Yeah, anyways, the problem again is that Botzra is literally means a sheepfold, so it could have been another place too, which is why it doesn't make any sense that it was all the way that far south. But and basically again here you can see that nothing really has been done in Botzra today. So you will not find anything if you go there today to say what is in Botzra today. But yes, it was the capital of the Edomites. So here we go. There we go.
I have received tidings from God, and an envoy is set out among the nations. Assemble and move against her, and rise up for war. For I will make you least among nations, most despised among humankind. Your horrible nature, your arrogant heart has seduced you. You who dwell in clefts of a rock, who occupy the height of the hill, should you nest as high as in the eagle, from there I will pull you down, declares God.
Yeah, and this tells us something about the Edomites too, which is they're well known for living in rocks. They're living in the caves. They're living in areas where you and I would not necessarily think, hey, this is a good place for us to live. Doesn't seem like a very open, field, kind of town kind of situation. The Edomites live in these places. Guess what? So did their descendants. We call them the Nabateans, and we call them the people who built Petra. So the fact that these people lived in these rocks, that was their thing. Yeah.
How long ago did they get out of the cave?
Yesterday, and then tomorrow they'll be back in the caves.
Oh, they keep coming back?
Yeah.
Oh.
Cappadocia is sort of like.
Yeah, Cappadocia is like, you can't keep people out of where they were used to living. But yes, they moved them out and they moved them into this village, and you drive through the village. They take you through the town of Petra. Then they show you where they moved the people out so that they could turn it into a tour, but they still come in at night and live there. But yeah, I mean, they don't want people living there, but yeah, people live in these places, and that's the Edomites. That was their thing. They lived in these places, and again, they were pretty safe, and they're and they felt pretty safe there, except that Jeremiah is saying, you're not safe. You're not safe even in those little crags on the mountains. They're going to get you. And again, Edom, they're our cousins.
And Edom shall be a cause of appallment. Whoever passes by will be appalled and will hiss at all its wounds. It shall be like the overthrow of Sodom and Gomorrah and their neighbors, said God. Nobody shall live there, no human shall sojourn there. It shall be as when a lion comes up out of the jungle of the Jordan against a secure pasture. In a moment, I can harry him out of it and appoint over it anyone I choose. Then who is like me? Who can summon me? Who is the shepherd that can stand up against me? Hear then the plan that God has devised against Edom and what has been purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the shepherd boys shall drag them away. Surely the pasture shall be aghast because of them. At the sound of their downfall, the earth shall shake. The sound of screaming shall be heard at the sea of reeds. See, like an eagle, he flies up. He soars and spreads his wings against Bozrah, and the heart of Edom's warriors in that day shall be like the heart of a woman in travail.
That's the Ammonites. Then it's the Edomites. Now, it's not that long. The 6 verses for the Ammonites, 15, 16 verses here for Edom. It's not a whole separate chapter. They actually combine this in one chapter. Sometimes they make like a 6-verse chapter. Whatever reason, they didn't want to do that in this. They didn't separate them as ideas. The next chapter is the Arameans, the people of Syria, whose capital is Damascus. It's still Damascus. Damascus is one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, in that it's been a capital for people, and it's been a city of continuous existence of major cosmopolitan nature for thousands of years. Most cities that were a city at one point have been reduced to ruin. Jerusalem at one point, a few hundred years ago, had 150 people living there. Damascus has always had thousands of people living there. Jericho at one point had 3,000, 4,000 people living in it during the Bronze Age. There's, but there were times when there were a couple of hundred people living there. Damascus has had people continuously living there for thousands of years. There's not many places like that. Babylon, Baghdad is one of those places too. Damascus is one of them as well. 1,000 years ago, Damascus was one of the most important cities in the world. There were more people living in Damascus than London, than Paris, than anywhere else. Damascus was one of those cities that was a literally hub for commerce. You had to go from Damascus and maybe you'd go to Cordoba or some city in Spain where there'd be another huge city, but 1,000 years ago it was a major city, and it was almost destroyed 5 years ago. It wasn't going to be completely destroyed, but much of it was destroyed during the war, during their civil war, including some of these other cities we're about to read about. Hamat, Arpad isn't a city anymore, but some of these other cities that are mentioned were devastated in not only our lifetime, in our some of us have cars that are older than when this happened. So this is some stuff that's happened even in our own days. This is about the Arameans.
Concerning Damascus, Hamat and Arpad are shamed, for they have heard bad news. They shake with anxiety, like the sea that cannot rest. Damascus has grown weak. She has turned around to flee. Trembling has seized her. Pain and anguish have taken hold of her, like a woman in childbirth. How has the glorious city not been deserted, the citadel of my joy? Assuredly, her young men shall lie fallen in her squares, and all her warriors shall be stilled in that day, declares God of hosts. I will set fire to the wall of Damascus, and it shall consume the fortress of Ben-Hadad.
And Ben-Hadad, those were the kings, were often known as Ben-Hadad. Hadad is their god, one of their gods. And Ben-Hadad or Hadad-ezer, these are names of Aramean kings. Ben-Hadad means the son of Hadad, the son of the god. Hadad-ezer means with the help of Hadad, the help. What?
It's a common last name.
Yes. So Hadad still exists in cognates. Now, again, like the name Eliezer is the same as Hadad-ezer. It's just replacing that name of the god. Yeah. So this is one of the main gods of that area, of that part of the world. So that is Aram. Okay.
Concerning Kedar and the kingdoms of Hazor, which King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon conquered. Thus
Also in
said
that
God,
region. Yeah.
Arise, march against Kedar and ravage the Kedemites. They will take away their tents and their flocks, their tent cloths and all their gear. They shall carry off their camels and shall proclaim against them terror all around. Flee, wander far, sit down low, O inhabitants of Hazor, says God. For King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon has devised a plan against you and formed a purpose against you. Rise up, attack a tranquil nation that dwells secure, said God, that has no barred gates, that dwells alone. Their camels shall become booty, their abundant flocks a spoil, and I will scatter to every quarter those who have their hair clipped, and from every direction I will bring disaster upon them, says God. Hazor shall become a lair of jackals, a desolation for all time. No one shall live there. No human shall sojourn there.
So that is that's concerning the people of Kedar, who seem to be like nomads. They seem to be people who live in tents. They have camels. They don't have the normal kind of city structure with castles and fortresses and those kind of things. But they're people who like are Bedouin, right? And they will be destroyed too, because they are powerful. They had a style where they clipped their hair, and people knew it because they probably clipped their beards or they clipped their hair in a certain way that was very distinctive. Well, they're not getting away either. There wasn't many verses; it was just a few verses. That's a little in that one too. So this chapter got a few people. We're not done. There's another one here, and this one's, I think, the last one in this chapter. But these are the Elamites, and this is a group of people. I'll just show you a quick map. They are the people who live in modern day Iran, in Persia, and Elam are people who are also mentioned in the Bible. You can see, I'll just show you these people, the Elamites. This is actually a fairly important part of the area, which you can see is there's Persia and Media and the people that will make up the Persian Empire, which, by the way, is the next empire that's coming. Here's the Babylonians, here's the Assyrians. But these people here in this area are further to the east of Babylonia, and clearly they had their imprint on the area as well. Their main town is Susa, known as Shushan, which of course is the capital during the time of Esther, and Ahasuerus. His capital was Susa, but that is part of the Elamites are part of the culture that will make up the next dynasty, the Achaemenid dynasty, which is what Ahasuerus was a part of. So the Elamites are now mentioned here. So, and they're mentioned earlier in the Bible. It's not like the first time we've seen them, but for whatever reason, Jeremiah is including them as well. So here is what it says about Elam.
The word of God that came to the prophet Jeremiah concerning Elam at the beginning of the reign of King Zedekiah of Judah.
Now, it didn't say that for the other ones, but it's actually telling us when this, the editor is telling us about this. Interestingly, almost as if to tell us, he said this about Elam during the time of King Zedekiah. Maybe because the editor knew that the Elamites end up becoming very powerful themselves.
Thus said God of hosts, I am going to break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their strength, and I shall bring 4 winds against Elam from the 4 quarters of heaven and scatter them to all those winds. There shall not be a nation to which the fugitives from Elam do not come. And I will break Elam before their enemies, before those who seek their lives, and I will bring disaster upon them, my flaming wrath, declares God, and I will dispatch the sword after them until I have consumed them. And I will set my throne in Elam and wipe out from there kings and officials, said God. But in the days to come, I will restore the fortunes of Elam, declares God.
Now, why do we even care about the Elamites? Like everybody else is like a direct next door neighbor to Israel. But the Elamites got dragged into this. And the answer is probably because the Elamites were allies of Babylonia and took part in these raids that all these other countries took part in. So because all of these people are on our bad list that, you know, Jeremiah saw these guys coming through, oh, Elamites are part of this. Okay, well, they'll be included as well. And again, you know, the modern equivalent to some extent could be, interestingly, Elam, Iran. Iran doesn't border Israel, but of course, Iran is funding all the people that are attacking Israel today. So Iran is funding Hezbollah, obviously, and they're funding Islamic Jihad. And some of the people that are sending rockets into Israel and sending terrorists to blow people up and kill people in Israel, that is Iran that's doing it. Again, modern day, what was Elam is now Iran. And it's interesting that they're included in this too. So, you know, during the 73 war, 67 war, Iran was our friend. Now they're not. After 79, Iran was not our friend. So things change, you know, and maybe it'll change back. The Shah was deposed. And the Shah was a friend of Israel. And then the people got so mad at the Shah and the fact, look, you know, they picked up, there was not one answer. There's not one answer for why Iran became Israel's enemies. But because Israel was close to Iran, it was a natural issue for them to turn on the previous administration and what they did. You know, some people say Israel trained, you know, Iran's secret service, the Savak, which is true, but I mean, the fact that that would cause people to hate Israel it's not quite that simple. But Iran and Israel's relationship was so strong that during the Iran-Contra affair, much of the weapons that got brought into Iran during that time were facilitated by Israeli arms merchants who had good relationships with Iranians even after the revolution. It's not the case anymore. Those are long gone, but there was a time when there were Israelis who still maintained good relationships with people in Iran, but those are going to have to be rebuilt almost from scratch. Most of those people, by the time Iran and Israel have relationships again, which I think they will, it's just going to be a matter of the regime falling. That'll happen, but a lot of those people will be long gone. They'll be dead. It'll be 50 years.
So God is talking to Jeremiah, and Jeremiah is still in jail.
When these prophecies are happening, it doesn't really say, except for the one about Zedekiah, which we know that Jeremiah was in jail during that time, not the very beginning of Zedekiah's reign, but later on. We don't know when these prophecies happened. They're all grouped together here. They're all grouped together here at the end. Yes.
So prophecy in 38 is that, Zedekiah will be dethroned.
Not Zedekiah, that Elam will be dethroned. That Elam will
That
be
my
dethroned.
throne in Elam.
Yeah, not that they're just going to be dethroned, but I'm coming against them.
And I will destroy.
Yeah.
The king.
I will destroy their kings. I will destroy Elam's kings. So Elam is going to be destroyed, but then he says, but I will restore them. And again, that's what it said for all of them, that eventually they're going to be destroyed and they'll be rebuilt. There's like, okay, well, they'll come back. So
But he also says that he's in 38, that he's going to.
when God says, I'm going to set my throne on them,
Yeah.
that means I'm going to let them have it.
Oh.
The word kisei here is complicated because normally we say, oh, well, that seems like a good thing. He's like saying, I'm going to come on them. I'm coming down on them. When I set my throne on them, that's a matter of they're going to get the full effect of my power. And that's what he's saying. My throne is coming down on them. So that is the Elamites. Now we come to the last couple of chapters. So we'll see if we finish here. If we're not, we'll go into the next week. But chapter 50 and 51 are the Babylonian chapters. This is where Jeremiah lets loose on the Babylonians themselves. Now, how does he do this, knowing that the Babylonians are in charge? They're very much in charge at this point. How is he going to get away with doing this? And how did this even come out? And so there are people who speculate that none of this came out until after they were destroyed. I'll point out why that's the case. But the last two chapters, and again, I don't think there's any reason to believe that anybody other than the editor put them here at the end, was because God wants, the people who are responsible for all this, the Babylonians, are going to get it. But where these prophecies were, how they came about, whether he spoke of this in his last days or it didn't come out until after he died. But Jeremiah does not withhold prophecies against the Babylonians. And here they are. Let's see what you think about it. But these are actually fairly long prophecies. So were there a collection of prophecies and then they were grouped together? Probably. But you saw that even in the other prophecies. Really, in some cases, they were collections of prophecies. And so here are the ones about the Babylonians. And again, there's not one prophecy. There's a few.
The word that God spoke concerning Babylon, the land of the Chaldeans, through the prophet Jeremiah. Declare among the nations and proclaim, raise a standard, proclaim, hide nothing. Say, Babylon is captured, Bel is shamed, Merodach is shamed, her idols are shamed, her fetishes dismayed.
Yeah, and so you can see Bel and Merodach are names of gods. They're Babylonian gods. Bel is a name of a god of Babylon. One of their main gods. Worshipped in a city also called Bel. Bel.
It's not
No, it's just Bel. It's not Baal, it's Bel. There's actually references to in the book of Daniel to the god Bel. Merodach is Marduk is also one of their main gods. That name should sound familiar, right?
Right,
Because why, Rosemary?
because Mordecai is derived from it.
Thank you, Rosemary. Yeah. Mordecai, our hero of the story of Esther, is named after a god of the Babylonians. Now, if that's not supposed to be ironic, come on. We're supposed to laugh at that, but most of us don't know. And again, the name Mordecai becomes a completely legitimate Jewish name. There's Mordecai's for the next 2,500 years. It's based on a god's name. So is the name Ishtar, Esther. They have the most non-Jewish names possible. It literally would be like if we wrote a story about Jewish kids and we said that there's a kid named Christopher and a girl named Christine, and we're like, those don't sound like Jewish names. You'd be like, yeah, because they have Christ's name in it. That's what the story is supposed to be about. And we know for a fact that Esther actually has a Hebrew name. Her name is Hadassah. The Bible tells us that. We don't know if Mordecai has a Hebrew name, but all we know is that Mordecai and Esther today, very common Hebrew names. No one would ever say Esther is a more or less Hebrew name than Hadassah. It's actually much more common Esther than Hadassah. I mean, I know Hadassahs, but I know a lot more Esthers. So yeah, it's supposed to be funny.
Ishtar is very funny.
Very funny. Very funny. So Ishtar is supposed to be, again, it's Venus. It's the goddess Venus. So we don't, yeah, that with Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman was supposed to be on the road movie. Interesting. So yeah. Anyways, so so here's what happens to Babylonia specifically.
For a nation from the north has attacked her. It will make her land a desolation. No one shall dwell in it. Both human and animal shall wander away. In those days and at that time, declares God, the people of Israel together with the people of Judah shall come, and they shall weep as they go to seek the eternal their God. They shall inquire for Zion. In that direction their faces shall turn. They shall come and attach themselves to God by a covenant for all time, which shall never be forgotten.
Yeah, that seems to have a lot to do with us and what happens to us. But that's, of course, that's what he's concerned about. It didn't really say that about the other nations because we weren't exiled by them, but we were exiled to Babylonia. And so what does it mean when these countries get, when this country now gets destroyed? That's, of course, what we're concerned about.
My people were lost sheep. Their shepherds led them astray. They drove them out to the mountains. They roamed from mount to hill. They forgot their own resting place. All who encountered them devoured them, and their foes said, we shall not be held guilty because they have sinned against God, the true pasture, the hope of their ancestors, God. Flee from Babylon, leave the land of the Chaldeans, and be like he-goats that lead the flock. For see, I am rousing and leading an assemblage of great nations against Babylon from the lands of the north. They shall draw up their lines against her. There she shall be captured. Their arrows are like those of a skilled warrior who does not turn back without hitting the mark.
Now, this was kind of weird because, again, it's telling us that Babylonia is going to be destroyed, that the Israelites will be able to go back home. It tells us again, too, that the Israelites have been taken advantage of by everybody, and everybody felt that they could be taken advantage of because we told the story that God has turned on us because we didn't do the right thing. And so people thought, well, they could get away with doing anything to us because God's turned against us. Well, of course, this has been played out many times in Jewish history, but so is this weird story, which actually, I remember reading this 30 years ago and thinking to myself, Babylon is Baghdad. Gosh, for the first few days of the first Gulf War in the 90s, we just pounded Baghdad with weapons that were smart bombs, smart missiles. They were going exactly to where they were supposed to go. And we just sat back and just let that happen for a few days. We softened them up before we even sent in any troops. We just, if you recall, these missiles were just going there. They did not turn back without hitting their mark. They were arrows like a skilled warrior.
Chaldea shall be despoiled, all her spoilers shall be sated, declares God. For you rejoiced, you exulted, you who plundered my possession. You stamped like a heifer treading grain, you neighed like steeds. So your mother will be utterly shamed. She who bore you will be disgraced. Behold the end of the nations, wilderness, desert, and steppe. Because of God's wrath, she shall not be inhabited. She shall be utterly desolate. Whoever passes by Babylon, too fast,
Sure.
will be appalled and will hiss at all her wounds. Range yourself round Babylon, all you who draw the bow. Shoot at her. Don't spare arrows, for she has sinned against God. Raise a shout against her all about. She has surrendered. Her bastions have fallen. Her walls are thrown down. This is God's vengeance. Take vengeance on her. Do to her as she has done. Make an end in Babylon of sowers and of wielders of the sickle at harvest time. Because of the deadly sword, everyone shall turn back to their own people. All shall flee to their own land. Israel are scattered sheep, harried by lions. First, the king of Assyria devoured them, and in the end, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon crunched their bones.
And so here it tells us that the Assyrians exiled us, and then Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonians did it. And so here it says flat out, it was a 1-2 punch. The Assyrians did it to us, the Babylonians did it to us right after.
Assuredly, thus said God of hosts, the God of Israel, I will deal with the king of Babylon and his land as I dealt with the king of Assyria.
Yeah. And so the Assyrians fell and the Babylonians are going to fall next. It's going to happen.
And I will lead Israel back to his pasture, and he shall graze in Carmel and Bashan, and eat his fill in the hill country of Ephraim and in Gilead.
And so there you see, you're going to be able to go back home. And you're going to go back home to Carmel, which is the mountain that Haifa is on. And you'll go up into Gilad, which is the far north. You're going to go into the Golan Heights. You're going to go back to these places that I told you you're going to go back to as your home, not just the area of Judah, but even into the north, even into Israel, the northern part. Well, Assyrians had captured the north 150 years before. So this has been going on for a few generations already.
In those days and at that time, declares God, the iniquity of Israel shall be sought, and there shall be none. The sins of Judah, and none shall be found. For I will pardon those I allow to survive.
That's it. I mean, it's over. You'll be able to go back home.
Advance against her, the land of Mariataim, and against the inhabitants of Pekod. Ruin and destroy after them to the last, says God. Do just as I have commanded you. Hark, war in the land and vast destruction. How the hammer of the whole earth has been hacked and shattered. How Babylon has become an appallment among the nations. I set a snare for you, O Babylon, and you were trapped unawares. You were found and caught because you challenged God. God has opened the divine armory and brought out the weapons of wrath, for that is the task of my sovereign God of hosts in the land of the Chaldeans. Come against her from every quarter, break open her granaries, pile her up like heaps of grain, and destroy her. Let her have no remnant. Destroy all her bulls, let them go down to slaughter. Alas for them, their day is come, the hour of their doom. Hark! Fugitives are escaping from the land of Babylon to tell in Zion of the vengeance of the eternal our God, vengeance for the holy temple. Summon archers against Babylon, all who draw the bow, encamp against her round about. Let none of her people escape. Pay her back for her actions. Do to her just what she has done, for she has acted insolently against God, the Holy One of Israel.
Yeah. So Jeremiah was not letting the Babylonians get off unscathed. And again, there is going to be punishment for them for what they did to us. So in the weird scene where Jeremiah says the Babylonians, you got to let them do what they're going to do. It's not because they're good people. It's not because they're doing anything other than what God wants them to do. And they will get theirs eventually. So he's not saying, well, they're all good But he's saying this is what God, this was God, they were doing God's work.
Assuredly, her young men shall
What?
fall in her squares, and all her warriors shall perish in that day, declares God.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
I am going to deal with you, O insolence, declares the God, Lord God of hosts. For your day is come, the time when I doom you. Insolence shall stumble and fall with none to raise her up. I will set her cities on fire, and it shall consume everything around her.
Yeah, so that seems to be part of a prophecy. And here is like a new prophecy that's coming about this around this time or around this theme. And this is specifically, again, how it affects us.
Thus said God of hosts, the people of Israel are oppressed, and so too the people of Judah. All their captors held them. They refused to let them go. Their mighty Redeemer, whose name is God of hosts, will champion their cause so as to give rest to the earth and unrest to the inhabitants of Babylon. A sword against the Chaldeans, declares God, and against the inhabitants of Babylon, against its officials and its sages. A sword against the diviners, that they be made fools of. A sword against the warriors, that they be dismayed. A sword against its horses and chariots, and against all the motley crowd in its midst, that they become women. A sword against its treasuries, that they be pillaged. A drought against its waters, that they be dried up. For it is a land of idols, they are besotted by their images. Assuredly, wildcats and hyenas shall dwell there, and ostriches shall dwell there. It shall never be settled again, nor inhabited throughout the ages.
Now, of course, it will be many times over, but it's going to be bad. Yeah, John. Were you?
37, is that not like, not PC right there, right?
Yeah, yeah. So yes. So John is saying they become like women. Yeah, I mean, we've already read it. Sometimes it's they cry like women, right? Their travail will be like women. You know, they're screaming like women in childbirth. Yeah, it's not PC, but it's used on both sides because sometimes the Israelites or Judah is compared to a woman, right? They're compared to a woman, fair Zion, right? Maid, right? You're the fair maiden. So we're compared to it too. So it's a sign of weakness in some cases, but also a sign of like, it's a sign of purity that's being taken away.
But it's so, Jeremiah just writes so marvelously.
Yeah. It really gets you. It gets you in the gut. And this is, yeah, you're going to see some stuff. We're about to see some stuff though that was hauntingly familiar from the first Gulf War and maybe the second Gulf War as well, where I thought to myself, how did people not see that this is terrifyingly, if it's very strange the way the Bible describes what happened to Babylonia during their time. It's coming up. I mean, you're about to see it.
It shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah and their neighbors, declares God. Nobody shall live there, no human shall sojourn there. Lo, a people comes from the northland, a great nation, and many kings are roused from the remotest parts of the earth. They grasp the bow and the javelin. They are cruel. They show no mercy. The sound of them is like the roaring sea. They ride upon horses, accoutered like a man for battle against you, O fair Babylon.
And there, Babylon is called Bat Bavel, just like we had Bat Zion. There's O fair Babylon, right? O fair maiden Babylon. What does your translation say there, Reverend Lynn? Yeah. So Bat means daughter, right? Mary, yours says daughter of Babylon, right? So Bat Zion is now Bat Bavel. But here's where it starts to get a little reminiscent, eerie. Wait a second. A people comes from the north, a great nation, and many kings are roused. They all come together, and they grasp bow and javelin. They are literally loading up on hitting you from the air with missiles. Bow and javelin are the equivalent of missiles and rockets during that period of time. And they're coming at you. And again, they're coming from the north. And in our case, they came from every direction, which also says it is. But there's no question that at that time, especially during the first Gulf War, which we included an alliance of Russia and the United States and most of the European countries, decided they were going to punish Iraq for the invasion of Kuwait. And so this was eerily similar in the sense that they were pretty well destroyed. Baghdad really got it. And here's what happened.
The king of Babylon has heard the report of them, and his hands are weakened. Anguish seizes him, pangs like a woman in childbirth.
There it is. Yeah, there's the women in childbirth.
It shall be as when a lion comes out of the jungle of the Jordan against a secure pasture. In a moment, I can harry them out of it and appoint over it anyone I choose. Then who is like me? Who can summon me? Who is the shepherd that can stand up against me?
Which, by the way, the idea of a jungle in Jordan, I mean, it's just not like that anymore, right? But there was a time when there were trees and there were animals and large enough, predators that lions, a lion could feast on stuff in that area. But anyways, again, these are all metaphors for what's going to happen to Babylon.
Hear then the plan that God has devised against Babylon and has purposed against the land of Chaldea. Surely the shepherd boys shall drag them away. Surely the pasture shall be aghast because of them. At the sound of Babylon's capture, the earth quakes, and an outcry is heard among the nations.
Yeah, it's not over. I mean, this is a different prophecy, but this is more against Babylon.
Thus said God, see, I am rousing a destructive wind against Babylon and the inhabitants of Levkamai. I will send strangers against Babylon, and they shall winnow her, and they shall strip her land bare. They shall beset her on all sides on the day of disaster. Let the archer draw his bow, and let him stand ready in his coat of mail. Show no pity to her young men. Wipe out all her host. Let them fall and slain in the land of Chaldea, pierced through in her streets. For Israel and Judah were not bereft of their God, God of hosts, but their land was filled with guilt before the Holy One of Israel.
Yeah. And so, again, remembering our own anguish, but this land of Babylon, of Chaldea, is going to, it's going to be a disaster.
Flee from the midst of Babylon and save your lives, each of you. Do not perish for her iniquity, for this is a time of vengeance for God, who will deal retribution to her. Babylon was a golden cup in God's hand. It made the whole earth drunk. The nations drank of her wine. That is why the nations are mad. Suddenly Babylon has fallen and is shattered. Howl over her. Get balm for her wounds. Perhaps she can be healed. We tried to cure Babylon, but she was incurable. Let us leave her and go, each to our own land, for her punishment reaches to heaven. It is as high as the sky.
Yeah. And again, maybe they didn't drink wine in Babylon in the modern era, but they definitely partook of oil. And there was tremendous wealth in that modern one, in this modern version of it. But here's what happens in the ancient time.
God has proclaimed our vindication. Come, let us recount in Zion the deeds of the eternal, our God. Polish the arrows, fill the quivers. God has roused the spirit of the kings of Media, for the divine plan against Babylon is to destroy her. This is God's vengeance for the holy temple.
And here it told you flat out who's going to do it. It said kings of the north. It said other nations, other people are going to be roused against you. Here it just told you flat out who's going to do it. The kings of Media, the Persians, they're the ones who are going to destroy Babylonia. And it is the plan. It's God's plan for making up for the holy temple. Again, they took our stuff. The Persians are going to take that stuff now. And so there's even Midrashim that Vashti was a descendant of Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar's daughter or granddaughter are somehow connected. So the Vashti story itself is playing out this kind of punishment for for Nebuchadnezzar and his family. And that those treasures, those cups, that stuff that Nebuchadnezzar took from the temple that he was using for his own wine parties, those wound up on Ahasuerus's table too. So when Esther has a wine party to defeat Haman, they're using the same cups. They never went away. Those cups are still there. It's a weird idea, but it's one that exists in the Midrash.
Raise a standard against the walls of Babylon. Set up a blockade, station watchmen, prepare those in ambush, for God has both planned and performed what was decreed against the inhabitants of Babylon. O you who dwell by great waters with vast storehouses, your time is come, the hour of your end. God of hosts has wholeheartedly sworn, I will fill you with enemies like a locust swarm. They will raise a shout against you. God made the earth by might, established the world by wisdom, and with understanding stretched out the skies. When God bellows, there is a rumbling of waters in the skies. Vapors rise from the end of the earth. Lightning accompanies the rain, and wind is brought forth from God's treasuries. Every mortal is proved dull without knowledge. Every goldsmith is put to shame because of the idol, for their molten images are a deceit. There is no breath in them.
And this has very little to do with the Babylonians in particular, but with all the peoples that worship these idols, which is that there's a living God that creates and sustains the world. And yet these people are worshiping idols.
They are delusion, a work of mockery. In their hour of doom, they shall perish. Not like these is the portion of Jacob, the one who formed all things, with Israel as a permanent possession, whose name is God of hosts.
Yeah. And what we'll read when we get to the book of Daniel is that some of these offerings and some of these great temples that the Babylonians had were amazing works of art and science and machinery, where they had these great furnaces and these great, places where they would make offerings. And Jeremiah saying these are all worthless. These are all garbage.
Not like these is the portion of, I read that. You are my war club, my weapons of battle. With you, I clubbed nations. With you, I destroyed kingdoms. With you, I clubbed horse and rider. With you, I clubbed chariot and driver. With you, I clubbed man and woman. With you, I clubbed graybeard and boy. With you, I clubbed youth and maiden. With you, I clubbed shepherd and flock. With you, I clubbed plower and team. With you, I clubbed governors and prefects.
And that word is used every time. Nipatsti. What is your translation for clubbed?
Break in pieces.
Break in pieces. Mary, what does yours say? Yeah. So
Club is worse.
yeah, it's worse. I think it actually probably carries the intensity of it. I think clubbed is actually probably a better translation here, which is
What's the
Nipatsti. It's probably has that connotation of doing it with a club. What does yours, John, have for that? Okay, well, yeah, but there's definitely a sense that this is violent. This is not just I destroyed or I've caused an end to, but literally I smashed it, I broke it, like I struck it down, like I broke it up with a hammer.
What's 23? First few words of 23.
Clubbed.
And the last few words of 22.
Yeah, it's I club, shepherd and flock. Yeah, it's the same word over and over. And then the last line is this one.
Oh, like,
But I will requite Babylon and all the inhabitants of Chaldea for all the wicked things they did to Zion before your eyes, declares God.
They're going to get it though. They're going to get it.
See, I will deal with you, O mountain of the destroyer, declares God, destroyer of the whole earth. I will stretch out my hand against you and roll you down from the crags and make you a burnt out mountain. They shall never take from you a cornerstone or foundation stone. You shall be a desolation for all time, declares God.
And by the way, Babylonia was never completely destroyed in the sense that, there's Baghdad is built right on top of it, but there's a good part of Babylonia that was destroyed by the Persians that wasn't rebuilt. So part of this was really a bad devastation that the Persians did a number on Babylonia from what we know, from what we can see archaeologically.
Raise a standard on earth, sound a horn among the nations, appoint nations against her, assemble kingdoms against her. Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz. Designate a marshal against her. Bring up horses like swarming locusts.
Yeah. Now let's just pause on that just for a moment. Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz. Now we know Ashkenaz because that's where the word Ashkenazi comes from, right? It is not Ashkenaz in the Bible, is not where we consider Ashkenaz. Ashkenaz, what we consider Ashkenaz in the modern, or not modern era, but 1,000 years ago, was France and Germany. That is not where Ashkenaz was in the Bible. Ashkenaz in the Bible is clearly based on the other countries that they named here. Ararat, you know where that is in Turkey. That's where Noah's Ark was. And Mini is in that area too, in Turkey and Asia Minor. That's where Ashkenaz was too. It was in Asia Minor. So these are areas that are very close by. They're not all the way up in France and Germany, which is later where we call Ashkenaz. We think the word Ashkenaz is a derivative or our version, biblical version of the word Scythia, the Scythian Sarmatians who lived in that area. And these were other allies of the Persians. They were further north. And so when Jeremiah and later Ezekiel talks about people coming from the north against Babylonia, they're talking about these people. They're talking about Persians along with these people from Asia Minor who are going to destroy Babylonia. They're going to destroy that area.
Appoint nations for war against her, the kings of Media, her governors and all her prefects, and all the lands they rule. Then the earth quakes and writhes, for God's purpose is fulfilled against Babylon, to make the land of Babylon a waste without inhabitant. The warriors of Babylon stop fighting. They sit in the strongholds. Their might is dried up. They become women.
There you go,
Her
John.
dwellings are set afire. Her bars are broken. Runner dashes to meet runner, messenger to meet messenger, to report to the king of Babylon that his city is captured from end to end.
Yeah. And guess what? The Persians end up building a bigger empire, which lasts hundreds of years longer. And again, just like the Babylonians took over from the Assyrians, the Persians are going to take over from the Babylonians and make their empire look like nothing. The Persian Empire eventually will extend all the way to Greece, as we know from the Battle of Thermopylae and the Spartans. If it wasn't for the 300, they'd all be living, we would all be speaking Farsi or whatever. I mean, that's the intention. So yeah, the Persians they ended up being really powerful. Yeah.
The fords are captured and the swamp thickets are consumed in fire, and the warriors are in panic. For thus said God of hosts, the God of Israel, Babylon is like a threshing floor ready to be trodden. In a little while, her harvest time will come. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, devoured me and discomfited me. He swallowed me like a dragon. He filled his belly with my dainties and set me down like an empty dish. Then he rinsed me out.
And by the way, does everyone have dragon as the
Yeah.
Is the translation there? You guys, dragon? You got dragon too? Monster, yeah. Tanin is the Hebrew word.
Is it the first time we've seen dragon?
The word dragon, it's just a question of how you're going to translate the word tanin. It's some kind of monster. It could be dragon though. We're not sure. Most people like dragon, but it's some kind of monster like that. It could have been a description of, again, what we would have called a dinosaur too. But anyways,
Let the violence done me and my kindred be upon Babylon, says the inhabitant of Zion, and let my blood be upon the inhabitants of Chaldea, says Jerusalem. Assuredly, thus said God, I am going to uphold your cause and take vengeance for you. I will dry up her sea and make her fountain run dry. Babylon shall become rubble, a den for jackals, an object of horror and hissing without inhabitant. Like lions, they roar together. They growl like lion cubs. When they are heated, I will set out their drink and get them drunk, that they may become hilarious and then sleep an endless sleep, never to awake, declares God.
yeah, I will just point out that the translation for this is a beautiful, and I love lions, so I will tell you why this one line in particular is just an example of it. In Hebrew, there are 3 words for lions. We only have one. We only have one. Well, that's not exactly true. We could have come up with some other terms. Does anyone have, there it says lions, lion cubs. Does anyone have any other translations, Mary? Lion whelps. Yeah, it's not, there's 3 words for lions in Hebrew, and we have them all here. Firim, a kafir is a lion. A gur is the one they translated as a cub or as a whelp. And then ariot, ari are also used. We have 3 words for them, and you know all 3. You've heard versions of these before. Kfir is not an uncommon Hebrew name now. It's a lion, a lion, kind of a lion, a cougar or whatever, but a lion. Gur, you know, David Ben Gurion. He changed his name from David Green to a more frightening Hebrew name, Gur, which is a lion, right? Gurion, a lion. And then Ari, or Arik, obviously Arik Sharon, a lot of Aris in Israel. Aryeh is a lion as well. So all of these are names for lion. Actually, one of the Israeli military jets was called a kfir, which is also a lion cub. So yeah, these are all tough. These are all words for lions in Israel, which are all used. And we just don't have words for them in English, so we just use the word lion. We're gonna finish up here, and you're gonna say, well, wait, we didn't get to the end. Well, we actually have several more verses. This is a hugely long, I think it's 64 verses. Yeah, 64 verses in chapter 51. And then next week, we're going to finish up with chapter 52, the last chapter of Jeremiah. We're going to finish. We're probably also going to start, you can see there's like 34 verses. So there's about 100 verses left we're going to read. The last chapter of Jeremiah is kind of a historical recollection of what happens. But we're going to finish up. We're leaving off right here in verse 30. What is it? 30. We're going to leave off at 39. So we'll start with chapter 40 as we go into the endless sleep, never to awake, a sleep that is at least brought on partially by alcohol. But I will tell you that, yeah, there's some interesting things about the destruction of Babylon that you haven't heard yet, which I think is very interesting because we've seen some of it happen in our own day. But yes, we'll finish up, and we probably also next week will start the first chapter of Ezekiel, depending on how much we get, how long it takes us to read the first, or the first half. Probably will be finishing up Jeremiah. I will tell you what. No, we haven't given it up. I will tell you this. When I share with you some of the midrash, I will share with you some of it next week. As I told you, the end of Nebuchadnezzar, which I find to be an interesting. The Bible doesn't comment that much about it, but the midrash does. So we will look at what happens to the Babylonians in that as I shared with you, one of the interesting ones is that Vashti is his daughter or granddaughter. So that, that Vashti gets hers even to some extent as a further embarrassment to Nebuchadnezzar, that Vashti gets taken away or killed or disappears and is replaced by Esther. But we will look at it. And Ezekiel, the first chapter of Ezekiel, which is the most famous chapter of Ezekiel, we may not have enough time even to get into that. So we'll see. But Ezekiel itself, not just talking about Midrash, but as far as the mystical elements of Ezekiel, I will only tell you this. There are people who say we're not supposed to read it, or if we read it, we're not supposed to dwell on it. We're not supposed to dig too deep into it because it will blow our minds. And so we're not supposed to do it. And if we do, oh yeah, it's meant to be studied
It's pretty trippy.
with great care, Yes, I don't want anyone to say I showed up and I microdosed for our discussion of Jeremiah. That came up in our when we were discussing that, because we went to the pageant of the masters on Saturday night, down in Laguna. You've done that before, right? You've had a pageant, yeah. So somebody said to us, it's much better if you microdose. I said, really? Yeah, because the pictures, I guess, come back to life or something when you're. I said, and then my wife said, what does that mean? Why would someone microdose? So wouldn't they just take the whole thing? And I go, I don't, look, Tracy, I said, it's very popular. It's very popular with the kids, but you can see that the descriptions of what people, well, at least biblical descriptions of things, are sometimes kind of trippy, and we have a little bit of it in Jeremiah, but Jeremiah is much more powerful and visual and almost graphic, whereas the stuff that we read in Ezekiel is going to be almost, again, like, it's so hard to figure out what he's talking about. That's why Rosemary says it's trippy. It's actually difficult to even wrap our head around. Yeah. It's like the book later on, book of Revelation, the book of Daniel in the Hebrew Bible, where we'll be reading this and we'll be like, what does that mean? And well, I'll only tell you this. According to the Talmud, there was a kid who was studying this and he came to him and he blew up. That's what the Talmud says. He blew up. So, yeah. So it's supposed to be, we're supposed to be cautious in it. And we don't really get that except in Genesis. We're supposed to be very careful with Genesis, especially thinking about things that happened before creation, and specifically about Ezekiel chapter 1. Those things, Genesis chapter 1 essentially, and Ezekiel chapter 1, we're supposed to tread lightly on. And again, there are warnings about it throughout the Talmud, which I'll show you next week. All right, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night at Deuteronomy, or Wednesday or Friday night with Shabbat.
That wasn't on the.
I know. We're going to send one out. I don't know why. It's probably I'm sure I should have caught it, but I probably didn't really think about the fact that it's September already. That it's September this weekend, and I don't even want to think about it. All right, everybody. Have a good rest of August.
Bye, everybody.
Don't jump through. Oh, and have a good time of Elul too. I meant to blow the shofar. Mike, can you blow the shofar real quick? No, he's just looking at me. You want to make a shofar sound? Mike doesn't want to make a shofar sound. All right, bye everybody. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Rosemary. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you.